The ugly alien princess walked alone through her palace halls, her slender fingers brushing against the cool walls that glowed with pale light. For as long as she could remember, she had known only silence. The other nobles of her world had long ago abandoned her, fearing her strange features. They whispered behind closed doors that her crooked horns and rough skin made her unworthy of company. Still, she held her head high, determined to tend her duties with grace and kindness. Every morning, she rose before dawn to care for the crystal gardens that bloomed beneath the glass domes. She watered the gem-like flowers and sang soft songs in her gentle voice, though no one was there to hear. Each day the princess watched the sky. Distant stars shimmered like distant dreams, and she wondered if somewhere beyond the horizon a soul existed who could see her heart rather than her face. The winds carried memories of laughter she had never known. She longed to share her songs and feel the warmth of a friend's hand in hers. Sometimes she traced the cracks in her reflection on the polished floor, imagining what it would be like to smile at someone who returned her joy. In the quiet hours, the princess wandered into the ancient library beneath her chambers. Scrolls older than time lined the walls, filled with stories of heroes, of love, and of worlds united in peace. She opened one volume after another, her emerald eyes flicking over the elegant scripts. Often she paused on tales of distant galaxies, where humans lived. The texts described humans as bold and curious, with hearts that shone brighter than the fiercest star. The princess felt a pang of hope when she read these words. Could a human one day hear her call and come to her side? When evening fell, she climbed to the highest turret where a transmitter lay hidden under layers of dust. It had been built centuries ago by her ancestors to send peaceful messages across the void. With careful movements, she cleared the panels and aligned the crystals that powered it. Her heart pounded as she activated the machine. A soft hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone floors and into her chest. She typed a single sentence into the ancient console. I am alone. I long for a companion who can see my true self. Her voice trembled as she spoke it aloud, the words echoing in the empty turret. She pressed the send lever, and the message shot into space like a bright comet. The tower lights dimmed as the machine powered down, leaving her in darkness. Stayed where she was, hands folded in her lap, waiting for a sign. Minutes passed, and then hours. The silence returned, heavy and vast. Still, she did not leave. She wrapped her arms around her knees and whispered to the skies, "If anyone hears me, show me you are there." The next morning, the palace felt colder than before. She walked the halls with slow steps, her mind filled with both hope and fear. What if no one ever answered? What if she remained alone for all her days? She pressed a hand to her chest where her ribs met, as though trying to hold together the fragile pieces of her courage. Yet within her rose a quiet flame of determination. If the universe contained but one soul who understood her, she would keep waiting. In the great dining hall, tables stood empty and chairs sat unused. She set out a simple meal of spiced fruit and soft bread, placing extra dishes as if expecting a guest. She arranged flowers at each place, their petals shimmering in the candlelight. At times she danced a slow waltz to music only she could hear, her robes flowing around her like gentle waves. She imagined laughter filling the hall, the sound rich and bright. She pictured a companion's hand brushing hers as they shared a quiet conversation. Those dreams warmed her spirit, giving her the strength to face another day. When dusk fell again, she climbed the turret once more. She carried a delicately carved flute made of moonstone. Before activating the transmitter, she played a soft melody, the notes drifting into the night sky. She hoped that the music might guide her visitor to her world. After the last note faded, she spoke her message once again, adding a plea, "Come to me if you hear my song." She activated the lever and watched the lights wink out, wondering if this time the void would answer her call. Throughout the long night, she felt no presence save the distant twinkling of stars, yet she did not lose faith. She remembered the stories she had read of hearts that reached across galaxies. She thought of the humans whose courage inspired her, Somewhere beyond the dark, someone might be listening. Perhaps they too felt the ache of loneliness and longed for a friend. She closed her eyes and let her thoughts travel outwards, carrying her hopes into the endless universe. As the first rays of dawn broke over the glass domes, the princess rose and brushed the dew from the crystal petals. She inhaled deeply, tasting the fresh air that had filled the gardens overnight. In that moment, she felt a new resolve. Even if the world called her ugly, she knew her heart was beautiful. She would not shrink from her longing, but embrace it, trusting that one day it would guide someone to her side. And so she walked forward, her steps light and her spirit unbroken, ready for whatever the stars might bring. The ugly alien princess rose before dawn, her heart heavy with both hope and fear. She wrapped her pale cloak around her shoulders and made her way through the silent halls toward the ancient transmitter. The corridors glowed faintly from the crystals set into the walls, their light soft and steady. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping palace. When she reached the transmitter room, she paused at the threshold. The machine stood like a forgotten relic, its metal casing covered in swirling patterns that told stories of long ago. Vines of silver crystal had grown around its base, glinting in the dim light. The princess ran her fingers over the smooth surface. Feeling the thrum of power still contained within, she knelt beside the transmitter and cleared away the dust that lay like a blanket over the control panels. Her emerald eyes shone as she worked, and her hands moved with practiced care. She opened a small compartment to reveal rows of tiny crystal cores, each one a vessel for a message sent into the void. She selected a single core and held it to her lips. "For whoever listens," she whispered. "May you hear my voice?" She placed the crystal into the slot and gently closed the panel. Then she stood and took a deep breath. The princess tapped a series of keys, each one engraved with the symbol of her world. The machine hummed to life, lights flickering as the ancient gears turned. She watched the display, where lines of code scrawled like falling stars. With a quiet murmur, she spoke the message she hoped would reach a kind soul beyond the sky. Her voice was soft, almost trembling. "I am alone on this world. I've waited for centuries and tended my people's legacy, yet no friend has come to share my days. If you hear this call, please answer. I long for a companion who can see my heart and share my songs." She pressed the final key and pulled a long lever. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor and up into her chest. The crystals around her seemed to pulse in time with the rhythm of her hope. A beam of light shot from the transmitter's antenna, cutting through the darkness and into the endless black beyond. For a moment, everything was still. Then the hum faded, the lights dimmed, and the machine wound down. The princess waited, her breath caught in her throat. She tapped her foot softly, counting the seconds as if they were precious jewels. Minutes passed, and then hours, but there was no reply. She sank to the floor beside the transmitter, wrapping her arms around her knees. The air felt cold against her skin, but the warmth of her hope burned brighter than any chill. She closed her eyes and listened to the echo of her own words. In that silence, she imagined a voice rising to meet hers, someone who would say, "I am here." When she opened her eyes again, she saw that the crystals around her had dimmed to a soft glow. She rose and walked to the window at the far end of the room. Beyond the glass dome, stars dotted the sky like scattered gems. She pressed her hand to the cool surface and stared at the nearest star, a pale blue light flickering in the distance. "Please," she whispered, "hear me." She left the transmitter room and climbed the spiral stairs to the top of the highest turret. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and she clutched the rail to steady herself. Below her, the palace shimmered in the early light, a lone island. In a sea of rocky plains, she climbed onto the wide balcony and leaned over. Listening for any sound that might drift to her from the void, the princess remembered the stories I had read of humans and their ships. They were said to journey across vast distances, guided by instruments that could detect the faintest whisper of a signal. She wondered if her message might reach such a ship. She closed her eyes and let the wind carry her thoughts outward. Hours passed as she stood on the balcony, lost in daydreams of a human coming to her world. She imagined his face, kind and curious, his hand reaching for hers in greeting. She saw him smiling at her songs and dancing with her under the crystal domes. Those images filled her heart with a gentle light, easing the ache of loneliness. As afternoon turned to evening, she returned to her chambers. She lit candles and prepared a simple meal of soft fruit and warm bread. The halls echoed with her footsteps as she carried the tray to the dining hall. She set out extra cups and placed a folded cloth where a guest might sit. Her hands trembled as she arranged the dishes. But she smiled at the thought of sharing them someday. After the meal, she picked up her moonstone flute and began to play. The melody rose and fell in gentle waves, drifting through the empty corridors and into the silent courts outside. She played the tune she had learned as a child, a lullaby her mother once sang. The notes slipped through the halls and out into the night, joining the stars in their endless dance. When the last note faded, she climbed back to the transmitter room. She replaced the crystal core she had used, clearing the slot for a new one. She opened another compartment and selected a fresh core, its surface smooth and clear. Carefully, she placed it in the machine and tapped out a new message. "If you found my first call, thank you. Send a second plea. Please come to me." The machine hummed once more, and she pulled the lever with both hands. The pulse of energy rushed through her, and the room filled with light. She watched the last trace of power fade from the display and felt her heart lift. She held her breath, waiting for a sign that the universe had answered. She sat beside the transmitter, her fingers brushing the cool surface. The hum returned, softer this time, and then the machine powered down. There was no response, but she felt something stir within her, quiet certainty that someone, somewhere, had heard her call with careful steps. She left the room and walked back through the palace. The doors closed softly behind her, and she paused in the hallway. The silence no longer felt empty but full of possibility. She pressed a hand to her chest where her heartbeat echoed in her ears. "I will wait," she whispered. "I will hope." Night, she lay in her bed beneath a canopy of silver silk. She stared at the ceiling, tracing the patterns of light that danced across the fabric. Sleep came slowly, but in her dreams she saw a figure approaching on a beam of pale light. He reached out to her, his face kind and open. She smiled in her dream, her heart soaring at the touch of his hand. When she awoke at dawn, the dream lingered. Like a warm embrace, she climbed from her bed and dressed quickly, her mind alive with wonder. She made her way once more to the transmitter room, her steps light and her spirit hopeful. She placed her hand on the console, ready to send another message if she must. The strange machine had become her ally, carrying her voice across the void. For the princess, each sunrise brought renewed faith. She cared for her gardens and her people's legacy, but her thoughts always turned to the stars. She watched the skies for any sign of movement, any flicker of light that might herald a reply. And though the days stretched into weeks, she did not falter. She knew that hope was a gift, and she would hold it close until someone came to share it with her. The ugly alien princess stood atop the turret as the sky turned pale with dawn. Her heart fluttered with hope and fear. She had sent her messages countless times, yet she never expected a reply so soon. Below, a small dot of light grew brighter, moving steadily toward her world. She held her breath and watched as the shape took form, a sleek ship with silver wings that cut through the upper atmosphere. The princess's emerald eyes widened. She rubbed her hands together to still their trembling and whispered, "It's him." She hurried down the spiral stairs toward the palace courtyard, where great doors stood open to welcome the dawn. The cold marble floor felt smooth beneath her bare feet as she hurried across the vast hall, her cloak trailing behind her like a shadow. Outside, the courtyard was still empty. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines as it descended. The princess climbed onto a low wall to get a better view. The ship's hatch lowered with a soft hiss, and a stairway extended to the ground. A single figure appeared, silhouetted against the bright sky. He wore a simple uniform of white and blue, with a small flag stitched to his shoulder. His helmet gleamed in the sunlight. The princess watched his cautious steps as he looked around, scanning the courtyard with wide eyes. She felt a flutter of nervous excitement. Her first visitor, the one who heard her call across the stars. The human captain paused at the bottom of the stairs. He carried a small device in his hand, its screen glowing with symbols he could not yet read. He tapped the screen and spoke into a headset. His voice was firm yet gentle. "Command, this is Captain Ryan. I have landed on the planet as instructed. Environment appears calm, no immediate signs of danger." The princess felt a thrill at hearing her name answered in a human voice. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her cloak swirling around her feet. The captain turned at the sound of her soft footsteps. He raised a gloved hand in greeting, but his eyes widened when he saw her form. Her curved horns, rough skin, and bright eyes were unlike any creature he had ever met. For a moment, they both stood frozen. The princess's heart pounded, and the captain's grip on his device tightened. Then she bowed her head respectfully and spoke in a gentle voice. "Welcome to my world. I am the princess." Her accent was soft, and her words carried a hopeful warmth. The captain hesitated, then removed his helmet. His brown hair fell loose around his face, and his green eyes met hers, with curiosity instead of fear. "Princess," he said, his voice calm, "I received your message. I am Captain Ryan of Earth. I came as soon as I could." He paused, choosing his words. "I did not know what I would find. But I heard your call." She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers itched at the edge of his uniform pocket. She thought he might still see her as ugly, but his eyes held kindness. She felt a warmth spread through her chest. Easing the ache of loneliness she had carried for so long, he stepped closer, lifting his hand in a gentle gesture. She held out her own hand, palm up, and he placed his hand on hers. His glove felt smooth and warm, strange against her rough skin. She bowed her head in respect, then raised her eyes to his. A small smile curved her lips. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. The captain studied her face, then nodded. "I am honored to meet you. Your message touched me. I have met many beings on my travels, but none have called so urgently for friendship." He glanced at the palace looming behind her. "Can I enter and learn more?" She nodded and led him into the courtyard. As they walked side by side, she pointed to the crystal gardens that lay beyond high walls. "This is my home," she said. "Few have walked here. Please follow me." The captain's boots clicked on the marble pathway as they moved slowly forward. The gardens bloomed with flowers of red and blue crystals. Sunlight shone through the glass dome above, casting rainbows across the smooth stones. The captain's eyes widened in wonder. He knelt to touch a petal, and the princess watched his gentle fingers trace the delicate edges. "They're beautiful," he murmured. She felt a rush of happiness at his words. "They grow only here. I tend them every day." She guided him along a winding path, explaining each plant's name and purpose. As they walked, they shared stories. The princess spoke of the lonely years she spent in the palace, caring for her world. The captain told tales of Earth's oceans, its cities, and its people. He spoke of human courage and kindness, and she listened with rapt attention. She thought of the books she had read, now coming to life in his words. He laughed at her shy smile when she asked him questions about his home. She heard the genuine interest in his voice, and her heart swelled. Suddenly the captain's device beeped. He raised it to his eye and read the display. His face grew serious. "Princess, I have incoming message. My superiors want a status report. They might send a crew to secure this area." He looked at her with concern. "I want to stay longer, but I must be honest with them." She felt her chest tighten at the thought of him leaving so soon. She forced a calm voice. "You must do what is right." "I understand." Her smile wavered, but she guided him to a nearby bench carved from pale stone. "Please rest here a moment." They sat together, their shoulders almost touching. The captain closed his device and set it aside, looked at her earnestly. "I did not come here to secure territory or to claim this world. I came because you asked for a friend." He paused, searching her eyes. "I want to help you. Will you let me?" Tears pricked the princess's eyes, but but she blinked them back. She placed her hand over his. "I will let you stay as long as you wish," she whispered. "I have waited so long for someone to understand me." The captain nodded and offered her a gentle smile. "Then I will stay." He stood and helped her up from the bench. "Will you show me your palace next?" Her heart leaped. "Yes," she said softly. "Come." They walked back through the garden, the bond of friendship growing with each step. The princess's world, once silent and empty, now echoed with the sound of his boots, her soft laughter, and the promise of companionship at last. And as they entered the palace, she felt a warmth she had never known, the warmth of a stranger turned friend. The princess led Captain Ryan through the grand palace halls, their footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows that danced with each careful step. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries, depicting her ancestors' deeds, peaceful gatherings, wise councils, and ceremonies under the stars. She paused before one tapestry and traced the golden threads with her finger. "This shows when my people first entered the galaxy," said softly. "We brought gifts of knowledge and art. We believed in unity." Her voice held both pride and sorrow, as if remembering a time now lost. Captain Ryan studied the tapestry. He tilted his head, curiosity shining in his eyes. "Your people sound wise and kind," he said. "What happened?" He spoke with respect, his tone gentle as he asked about her history. She took a steady breath. "We chose isolation long ago," she explained. "We feared the wars we heard in other worlds. So we closed our borders and focused on our own growth. But isolation left us lonely." She lowered her gaze, her horns casting a soft shadow across her face. "And after my parents passed, I had no one left." Ryan nodded, understanding in his expression. "Sometimes fear keeps us safe, but it also keeps us apart." He paused, then smiled. "I'm glad you reached out. It takes courage to break isolation." She looked up, surprised by his words. A warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your courage gives me hope." He continued walking, and the princess guided him to a room filled with musical instruments from her world. Harps made of silver wood, drums carved from glowing crystals, and windpipes shaped like curving horns lined the shelves. She picked up a small, stringed instrument and plucked a gentle note. The sound hung in the air, clear and bright. "This is called a lirin," she said. "It sings with the voice of the heart." She handed it to Ryan. "Would you like to try?" He accepted it with a curious smile and ran his fingers across the strings. A soft, trembling melody emerged. The princess listened, her emerald eyes shining. "That is beautiful," she said. "You have music in your hands." He laughed quietly, a rich, warm sound. "I never thought I'd play alien music," he said, "but I like it." He plucked another string, and the note rang out like a drop of water. "Thank you for sharing this." She nodded, her heart light. "Music can bridge worlds," she said. "It speaks when words cannot." After a while, she led him to the dining hall. The long table was set with silver bowls and crystal chalices. In the center sat a platter of sweet fruits and spiced nuts. She motioned for him to sit, and he took a seat opposite her. She poured a pale, cool drink into his cup. "This is made from moonberries," she explained. "It tastes like starlight. And honey?" Ryan sniffed the drink and sipped carefully. His eyes widened at the gentle sweetness. "It is amazing," he said, smiling. "I have tasted many things, but never this." He raised his cup to new friendship. She lifted her cup in return. To friendship, she echoed. As they ate, they shared stories. Ryan spoke of Earth's blue skies and deep oceans, of forests where trees reached high into the air, and of cities that sparkled like jewels at night. The princess listened in wonder, picturing each scene in her mind. In turn, she told him of her crystal gardens, where flowers glowed softly in the moonlight, and of the quiet libraries filled with scrolls that whispered tales of ancient heroes. She described her daily rituals, feeding the gardens, studying by candlelight, and tending to the transmitter in hopes of a reply. Ryan leaned forward, his eyes shining. You have a beautiful life, he said. It may be lonely, but it is full of wonder. He reached across the table and gently brushed his hand over hers. The touch sent a spark through the princess's heart. She felt a warmth bloom in her chest, so a flower had opened within her. She smiled softly and dropped her gaze to their joined hands. It was lonely before, she said quietly, but now it feels alive. The hall grew quiet as servants' silent, graceful figures brought fresh plates and refilled their cups. The princess and Ryan barely noticed them, lost in their own conversation. When the meal ended, she rose and led him outside to the palace gardens. The night air was cool, and the gardens glowed under the light of 3 moons. Crystal flowers reflected the pale lunar glow, casting prismatic patterns on the stone paths. The princess stopped beside a reflecting pool, its surface smooth as glass. This was my mother's favorite place, she said, kneeling by the water's edge. She picked a single lunar rosa bloom of delicate white crystal and held it. Above the pool, she said that when you look into the water, you see your true self. Ryan knelt beside her and looked into the pool. His reflection was clear, his face thoughtful. Then he looked at her, and she met his gaze. She saw kindness, respect, and genuine wonder in his eyes. You are more than your reflection, he said softly. Your heart shines brighter than any star. Tears welled in the princess's eyes, and she blinked them away. She offered him the lunar rose. He accepted it reverently and placed it behind his ear. She laughed a musical sound that echoed through the garden. Thank you, she whispered. They walked slowly through the moonlit paths, their shoulders brushing. The princess felt as if she floated, unburdened by centuries of loneliness. She turned to Ryan and asked, "What will you do now?" He considered her question. "I must report back to my ship," he said, "but I want to stay as long as you will have me. I want to learn more about you and your world." Her heart leaped. "You are welcome," she said, her voice steady and bright. "I will show you everything." They paused beneath a canopy of crystal vines, and Ryan looked up at the sparkling tendrils. "Your world is a treasure," he said. "I only hope others will see it as I do." She placed a hand on his arm. "With your help, they will." Her words held a promise of friendship, understanding, and unity. As they stood there, the moons reached their highest point, and the night sky filled with stars. The princess felt a gentle peace settle around her. For the first time, she understood that true beauty came from the heart, that friendship could transform even the loneliest soul. And in that moment, under the watchful light of distant moons, the princess knew that her world and her heart would never be the same again. The next morning began with a pale light that filtered through the crystal domes. Captain Ryan stood at the edge of the palace balcony, scanning the horizon with a handheld scanner. The device beeped softly, and his brow furrowed. "Signs of incoming ships," he said, his voice low. "They bear the insignia of the Corvath fleet." The ugly alien princess joined him, her heart pounding. She wrapped her slender arms around herself against a sudden chill. "The Corvath," she whispered. "They have long guarded these sectors. They see humans as invaders." She led him down the marble stairs into the great hall, where ministers and scholars gathered in anxious clusters. The scholars whispered fears of war. The ministers spoke of treaties broken and worlds lost. The princess stood at the front, her pale eyes steady. She raised her voice so all could hear. "The human captain is my guest," she said softly but firmly. "He comes in peace. He has shown me kindness. I ask you to trust him." Some elders shook their heads. One tall minister with silver hair spoke from the back. "Princess, our isolation kept us safe. If we allow humans here, we risk our world's security. The Corvath will not forgive such boldness." His words echoed like thunder. Captain Ryan stepped forward, removing his helmet. His green eyes met theirs. "I understand your fears," he said, "but I ask you to look at what you see here. I have walked these halls. I have tended these gardens. I have shared meals with your princess." He paused and met the princess's gaze. She offered him a small nod, her hand resting on his arm for support. He turned back to the council. "Let me speak with the Corvath ourselves. Allow me to show them your world is peaceful." I will not ask your princess to risk her safety. Let me be the envoy." The palace doors opened with a low rumble. All eyes turned as 7 sleek warships broke through the cloud layer. Their dark hulls glinted with harsh lights. A low horn sounded from each vessel, a challenge that shook the air. The princess felt her breath catch. She gripped Ryan's hand. "They demand we expel you, or they will fire," he said gravely. The elders murmured. Fear twisted their faces. The silver-haired minister strode forward. "You have until sunset to send him away," he called to the sky. "Fail, and we will answer with our defenses." The princess lifted her chin. She felt the weight of centuries on her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered the lonely years. Then she opened them with fresh resolve. She spoke into the silent hall. "We will not turn our backs on a friend." She moved to the balcony and raised her arms. Her voice rang out, gentle but clear. "People of my world, hear me. We stand at a crossroads. We can choose fear or we can choose hope." Captain Ryan came to us when I called. He heard my heart's plea. If we cast him out now, we cast out our chance for friendship. Below, the ministers hesitated. Some bowed their heads. Others watched the approaching fleet. The horns sounded again. The princess held her breath and turned to the captain. "Your choice," she said softly. "Will you face them with me?" He nodded and drew a small communication device from his uniform. "I will speak to their commander." He tapped a code and spoke into it in a steady voice. Words flew between distant ships. The princess could not hear their meaning, but she watched his face for hope. After a moment, Ryan nodded and raised his hand. "They will allow us to parley," he announced. On neutral ground, the princess exhaled, relief flooding her. She helped him to his feet. "Thank you," she whispered. They made their way to the landing platform, where a single Corvath shuttle descended. Its ramp extended with a hiss. A tall figure emerged, clad in dark armor that reflected the sun's glare. His face was hidden behind a mask, but his posture spoke of authority. Captain Ryan stepped forward and saluted. The Corvath commander returned the gesture. The princess approached slowly, her heart in her throat. The commander studied her form for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon. "I am Commander Svel of the Corvath fleet," he said in a voice like grinding stone. "You have broken our borders and welcomed an alien species. This requires explanation." The princess bowed her head respectfully. "Commander Svel, I invited Captain Ryan because I believed in peace. I longed for a friend. I sent my call into the void, and he answered, 'We share no threat, respects our world and its ways.'" Svel's gaze shifted between her and Ryan. He tapped a gauntleted finger on his wrist device. "Your people chose isolation to avoid war. Now you accept visitors. The Corvath must ensure your world's defense. But I will listen." He turned to Ryan. "Earth has been both friend and foe to many. Why should we trust them?" The captain took a steady breath. "Earth has its faults, but I came here to bring friendship. I have no army. I traveled alone to answer the princess's plea. My actions here will prove my words." Svel studied him in silence. The wind moved through the princess's hair as she waited. At last, the commander lowered his head and spoke into his device. After a quiet pause, he turned back. "The Corvath will hold fire for now. We will watch and learn. If you break faith, we will act." The princess felt her knees weaken, but Ryan's hand steadied her. She drew a slow breath. "I give you my word," she said. "We will prove our trust." Svel nodded once sharply. Without another word, he turned and ascended the ramp into his shuttle. The engines flared. The craft rose toward the warships above. As the last glow of the shuttle's engines faded, the princess and the captain stood alone on the platform. The horn calls had ceased. The Corvath fleet held its position in the sky, silent watchers. Ryan released her hand and looked at her with admiration. "You were brave," he said gently. "You risked everything for me." She smiled, a soft light in her emerald eyes. "I could not turn away from the one who listened." They returned to the palace in quiet triumph. Ministers and scholars fell silent as they passed. The princess led Ryan to her private balcony, overlooking the vast plains beyond. She leaned against the railing, her heart still hammering. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked to the sky where the Corvath cruisers glinted like distant stars. "We prepare," he said. "We show them our peace is real. We share our world's beauty and our people's stories. Then, when the Corvath see your kindness, they will trust." She nodded, hope reborn in her chest. "And if they do not?" He took her hand and pressed it to his chest. "Then we face them together." She felt the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. For decades she had been alone with her longing. Now, with her companion at her side, she knew she would never face fear again. And as the pale sun climbed higher, she vowed to fight for the friendship she had waited so long to find. The sun rose over the palace in a soft glow as the ugly alien princess and Captain Ryan prepared to meet the Corvath observers. The courtyard bustled with gentle activity. Servants arranged crystal sculptures and lined the garden paths with fresh lunar roses. The air smelled of sweet blossom and warm stone. The princess watched each movement with care. She wanted everything perfect for this moment of truth. Captain Ryan stood beside her, checking the scanner on his wrist. "They are watching," he said softly. "Their sensors lock on every sign of life." The princess nodded and smoothed the folds of her pale robes. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her world's hopes on her slender shoulders. As the courtyard doors opened, a small Corvath delegation walked in. Their armor was sleek and dark, their helmets tucked under one arm. They moved with measured steps, their eyes curious but cautious. The princess stepped forward and bowed deeply. Captain Ryan followed, his posture respectful. The Corvath leader, Commander Seville, inclined his head. His voice was calm. "I come to see if your peace holds," he said. The princess offered her hand. "Thank you for giving us this chance," she whispered. Ryan smiled and gently pressed his hand to his chest, a human gesture of goodwill. The Corvath shifted but did not withdraw. They led the trio to the crystal gardens, where the day's first light danced on the prism petals. "These flowers open only under true friendship," the princess explained. She picked a blue-banded bloom and handed it to Ryan. He took it with wonder and placed it before the Corvath leader. The commander bent to inspect it, his armored gauntlet gentle against the fragile petals. The flower glowed softly as if in greeting. A distant horn echoed. The Corvath warships held position above. The princess took Ryan's arm. "Our demonstration will begin," she said. They led the Corvath into a large hall where musicians waited. The princess took her place on a raised platform and lifted a moonstone harp. Her fingers plucked a melody sweet and clear. The musicians joined a soft drum, a gentle windpipe, and Ryan's own human flute. Together, they wove a song of unity, a tune that rose and fell like gentle waves. The Corvath stood in silence, their faces hidden but their bodies still. When the last note faded, the princess lowered her harp. She watched the Corvath leader for a sign. After a long moment, Commander Seville removed his helmet. His dark hair fell loose, and his green eyes met hers. "Your music carries truth," he said quietly. "Yes, it speaks where words may fail." The princess felt warmth swell in her chest. She stepped down and approached the leader. "Thank you," she said. "We share our hearts with you." Seville nodded and turned to Ryan. "Your kind helped bring this peace," he said. Ryan inclined his head. "I only answered her call," he replied. "Courage guided me here." The Corvath studied the pair, then asked to see more of the world. The princess led them through the palace, showing them the ancient library. She opened scrolls that spoke of knowledge and art. The Corvath traced the graceful symbols with curiosity. One young officer gently touched the page, his eyes shining. "We did not know such beauty existed," he said. Next they walked to the transmission room. Ryan showed them how the princess sent her messages. The Corvath ran their fingers over the controls, their features softening. "Your call was pure," one officer whispered. "No trick, no trap." The final test came at the edge of the city, where the plains stretched into a golden sea of grass. The sun dipped low, and the Corvath ships began their descent. The princess and Ryan stood beneath the open sky. The warships released small drones that hovered in formation. The Corvath watched closely, waiting for any sign of betrayal. Ryan raised his hand and spoke into a small device. His voice echoed over the field. "This world is peaceful. It has no hidden weapons. I pledge to you our honor and our truth." He stepped aside and gestured to the princess. She reached out and touched the grass, her fingers brushing the golden blades. "This land feeds us," she said. "Nothing here harms." The drones hovered nearer, their sensors scanning every inch of ground. After tense minutes, they pulled back and returned to the ships. The Corvath ships rose slowly, then held. The commander signaled, and the formation shifted. At last, the fleet hovered in respectful orbit. The horn calls were silent. Captain Ryan turned to the princess, relief shining in his eyes. "They accept," he whispered, her heart racing. "We did it," she said softly. Commander Sval descended from his ship alone. He walked to the princess and bowed.
Nice.
"Your world is worthy of peace," he said.
Nice.
"The Corvath will open our borders to you and your human friend." He looked at Ryan. "To you, Earth Captain, we offer safe passage." The princess stepped forward, tears glinting in her emerald eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. Svel placed a gauntlet hand over his heart. "Your courage and truth saved us all," he replied. In the days that followed, emissaries from the Corvath and from Earth arrived. They walked the crystal gardens, studied the ancient library, and shared meals in the grand hall. The palace that once echoed only with the princess's lonely footsteps now rang with laughter and music. New friendships were born, and old wounds began to heal. One evening, the princess stood on her balcony with Captain Ryan. The 3 moons shone bright overhead. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against her skin. "Oh?" She turned to him and smiled. "We changed the course of our worlds," she said, together. He rested his forehead against hers. "You showed us beauty beyond appearance," he whispered, "and I found a friend I never knew I needed." She closed her eyes and leaned into his embrace. The night air was cool, but her heart burned with warmth. She no longer felt ugly or alone. She was a princess of 2 worlds now, with a companion who saw her true beauty. As the moonlight draped them in silver, the princess made a silent vow. She would honor this friendship, protect her world, and stand by Ryan with every breath. For she had learned that true beauty and strength shone from the heart, and that bond beyond appearances could change the fate of galaxies.